I know it's more sensitive there in terms of experiences where you went, what you did. For what you can share, can you walk us through your time there?
Yeah. So, talking about expectations, and I won't walk through the entire mission, but my first mission in Afghanistan with those guys was the night that Adam Brown was killed.
Oh, wow.
And it was this is so strange to say this. It was in Konar Province, which we know, was the most kinetic province by the sheer terrain alone. It was basically an enemy safe haven. And I think Restrepo, and if you've ever seen those documentaries about Korengal Valley, speaks to how kinetic it was. They went into a valley that no Americans had been in during the entire Afghan war. And just watching them figure out how to get into that valley, which took like 2 weeks to find a suitable insertion and ingress route was impressive. And then executing that insert was one of the hairiest things I've ever done. But watching, and this is, having had the experience base I had with the battles of Ramadi and Sadr City, maybe there was a little youthful arrogance that I was seasoned, but when the valley came alive on them and they were hitting a specific target with said name bad guys in it, watching those guys operate and jump from rooftop to rooftop while being fired at from a 360-degree angle, and the communications on the radio, and like I had eyes like this because I've never seen a military unit maneuver like that. And I realized that the standard was a lot higher than I expected, and that I was not playing playing ball to that level. And I remember when we got back from that one, and even getting Adam out was hairy, and then watching the TF-168 pilots do what they did to get us out under massive fire, it was shock. And I remember after, finally got Adam's body back to Bagram, and we made it back to where we were, I just sat down on a bench, and I had these wide eyes, and a guy named Lou Langlis, who walks by, and he's like, "Mikey, you okay?" And I just look at Lou, and I said, "Is every night like that?" And he basically said, "Yep." Hit me on the shoulder, and Lou was a stout guy, and he's like, welcome to this place. And the rest of that deployment was just, okay, watch, learn. And basically I was a glorified radio man and a JTAC, which I loved, for a guy named Jonas Kelsaw.
Yeah.
Who was...
another extortion guy.
Jonas was like just off the charts brilliant. And he had this way about him. Everyone loved Jonas. And then you have like Lou Langlis, who's like the ultimate hard. And they were like the perfect pairing. So this is my first experience. And the value of just being part of those guys for that deployment and watching and learning really set the bar for the rest of my time there. And just wildly impressed, not only with the officer corps, but more importantly, the senior enlisted corps. I mean, just those were the most transformative years of my career, because not the sharpest tool in the shed, not the fastest, not the strongest, not the best shot, but I do want to be a part of the team, and I want to be a value add. I want to be a multiplier to whatever we're doing, and I valued every bit of my time there. I got some great tours, got the exchange tour with Delta, and it seemed like it went quickly. It seemed like it was forever, but at the end of it, it seemed like it was a small snapshot of my life. Yeah. And I will always sing volumes about the quality of the operator there.
Man, it never gets old hearing about it. As someone who never went, never screened, wish that I had, frankly, just because of how legendary that place.
But everyone was getting some at that time.
Yeah.
Like,
even still,
like,
though,
hey, I'm going on combat deployments to SEAL Team 3. Like,
yeah.
I'm just going to keep riding this out for as long as possible, and I get it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you as a classic example, though, I mean, to cherry pick a career in the vanilla SEAL teams, it would be hard to find one as illustrious and busy and well-rounded as yours, but then to go to a command and be that baffled by how much higher in terms of the level of competency says quite a bit.
Well, I think the problems was we professionalized the force, and you would have more knowledge because you were in
The
the
Force
90s.
21 stuff, yeah.
Where, I was told by the older generation that guys could stay in a platoon for like
Yeah.
6 years.
Well, and I think sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. But that duration in a platoon, and we all know that the longer guys are together, the more cohesive in the line they are. I mean, you could pick off who somebody is on night vision from 100 meters away just by the gait in their walk.
Yeah.
And maybe we've lost that, but I think guys want to be at the SEAL team a little bit longer. I understand the needs of the community. Guys need to go to BUDS, but we find that there are guys that want to do careers at BUDS. Then let them do that. But the guys that want to stay in platoons and do what they came in to do, I think those discussions have to be had.
Yeah, I agree. And as having done it a full workup, and it was an ARG Alpha, full benefit, almost 2-year workup followed by a 6-month or 8-month deployment. I do wish that the regular SEAL teams were still that way for the simple fact that, or I guess on top of what you just mentioned in terms of, having a better sense of tenure there, is a subject matter expertise in a specific area of operations, and I understand why Force 21 happened and, turning it into a more conventionalized, unconventional unit, which is a bit of a contradiction, but because all of the work that the entire nation was doing was all in one area for several decades, I get it. However, my first platoon, Team 5, was, cold weather, and, Team 1 was jungle, Team 3 was desert, and you had guys at each of those commands that had spent 20 years in those environments and were incredibly experienced in those niche operational environments, in mid-2000s and beyond. That completely went away. Now if something happened in the jungle or in cold weather, legitimate cold weather, I know Afghanistan has its parts, but North Korea or somewhere where it's legitimate wintertime all year round, or a lot of the time, I think we would be in over our head, or diving, same thing, Now you could make the argument that combat swimmer isn't even really necessary with SDV teams in existence, but
And now autonomous vessels, subsurface.
Yeah. But yeah, I do wish that there was still a component of that subject matter expertise. Is there a difference between the officer role in the regular SEAL teams and at DEVGRU?
Where you have, and you say this to anyone in the military, like Army infantry or Marine Corps infantry, that you have 3 officers in an 18-man platoon.
Yeah.
It'd be like it's one officer for 40 guys, or 36. So one officer per troop. And so, I really did like that component. Not that I didn't like getting challenged by the other officers or challenging them, but I think that's the way it should be.
And for the listener, a troop is how many?
Troop, I think what you're authorized, and the reality of the guys, you're usually around 20 guys, and then you have all the enablers. You throw in the CCTs, the PJs, the dog teams, and we have combat support that we bring out on the missions as well. But then if you throw a ranger element onto the mission, I mean, you could be 60 to 70 guys going on a mission.
The regular SEAL platoons, technically, it would be an officer per 8 guys, really. In a regular SEAL platoon, you have your OIC, AOIC, and in some instances, a third O. I guess from a way that the officer is implemented into the operational environment, do you see a disparity between regular SEAL teams and DEVGRU?
Yeah. So, and we all know the third O, which is a great position to have. Is
Unless you're the third O.
Well, you get to be one of the guys.
Yeah.
Consider that an OJT deployment
Yeah.
that prepares you to take AOIC and AOIC to take platoon commander. But, one, yes, you're involved in the tactics to a degree at the tier 1 level, but I mean, really, your E8, E9, and your senior enlisted have that part. you were more focused. In the regular SEAL teams, I felt the officers were knee deep in the tactical plan as well. Mainly the orchestration, the coordination of all the supporting elements for those guys to execute their tactical plan. And so probably working more with the CCTs and intel and operations departments to make sure that the synchronization of the mission is set, the supporting assets are set, and then strategic communications over the radio to ensure that one, your hire is getting near real-time updates, that all the assets, whether they need to be backfilled, that operations is fully tracking every phase of the mission. That was my primary focus. So glorified radio man. And then I didn't mind that. So I went through NSW comms. I think there's a picture that somehow got circulated where I'm wearing a X-Wing, where a lot of officers didn't do that because they had an enabler who was had the radio. I carried SATCOM on me because I didn't want to plug into somebody else's headset. I wanted it there, and it also provided redundancy. I still took that enabler on missions. That I enjoyed that piece and making sure that I was doing the best to support the guys that were fighting the fight. And then maybe they would allow me to come on target at the end. I'm joking. But I really focused on that piece and being very good at that ground force commander role, knowing my lane, and that you've got a guy with 15 deployments who I can't just question tactically, even though I am going to ask why, more for my education of why are you doing it this way. And that was, I love that piece.
I mean, it's refreshing to hear the way that everything is implemented there. I mean, to me, from hearing, having had a number of guys on the show that spent a significant amount of time at that command, it reminds me of, it's kind of like the brochure that you see that's sitting at the recruiter. It's like that. What's in the brochure is at that command, far more so than the 5% of what you do in the regular SEAL teams. It's actually in the brochure kind of thing. Did you do any, cross training with other countries' special operations units at that command?
We did. Israelis, Brits, Aussies, and then same over at Delta. What I found is they had probably deeper exchange programs. Like there was a Canadian JTF2 officer that was basically acting as a troop commander, SAS, Australian SAS. Enjoyed that piece as well. And, what I found was same DNA of foreign SOF, no budget compared to us. And that was the overwhelming power, was the assets that we had at our avail where they did not. And that was it. That was the game changer in terms of, let's say, capability and capacity to do what we do where they couldn't.
Yeah. Would you say caliber-wise they're of the same caliber?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
Yeah. If you had to pick a foreign SOF group to be a part of, which one would it be?
So I've got to throw this in. And the guys that work with the GROM always spoke volumes about how tactically competent they were. I never had that opportunity, but I've heard that story more times than I can count.
Yeah.
I thought the Brits were amazing. I thought the JTF2 guys were amazing. Where the Brits are probably, where their super strength compared to us was their low vis operations, because they were doing it in Northern Ireland and they had developed a lot of the trade craft that we probably had, adopted from them.
Yeah.
JTF2 guys, great at cold weather stuff.
Because they grew up in it.
They grew up in it. They're playing hockey.
Drinking syrup and playing hockey.
But each of them have their strengths based off the regions they usually deploy to.
Yeah.
Like the Aussies are very PACOM focused because that's the immediate threat to them. But I can't say I had an allergic reaction or a distaste to anything I saw from those guys.
Yeah.
None.
Not one that you would pick to be a part of if you had to.
Probably
jump
the
team.
Brits.
Brits,
Yeah, the SBS.
Yeah. The ground guys, I will say, to echo your sentiment or what you've heard is spot on. I was hyper impressed with those guys, and to me the almost scary part was seeing it in real time, that the gear was very similar, same type of guy, but also realizing, especially at that time, in the early 2000s, where it was like 20, 30 years ago, we'd have been fighting these guys, and that was kind of alarming. I would say it was humbling, actually, in that it's like, man, these dudes are legit war fighters that I would not want to have to face these guys, They were also hilarious because it was like, this was before the show Vikings existed, but it was like Vikings walking around, and they're like cooking Pola sausage on burn pit fires, and just like, or like, they'd have a barrel with like 2x4s and just shit that you wouldn't want to cook food over, and and they're like heating up meat and stuff on it, and it was just they were a trip. But yeah, such a capable group for sure.
I heard they drink vodka it's water.
Yeah. From an operational experience standpoint at DEVGRU, again, I know there's not there's less that you can share about that. Can you recollect any missions that you can share that were impactful, that were either a big lesson learned or something that you reflect on?
Oh, yes. But by the sheer volume of some of the things that we were asked to do, we sometimes were given ample time and ample support to prepare. And we all know that it's no different than sports. The game is won before you step onto the field. But constant lessons learned, stepping between different environments, and I call it the disease of victory. When you're successful in Afghanistan, you try to, again, similar to Sadr City, put that template on a completely different country, even if it is a Islamic country, and having to relearn that lesson every single time. But to the point where guys are like, "Hey, are we assuming this is too easy because this was successful in Afghanistan? Do we need to relook at this?" But if similar to SEAL Team 3, I think in Mikey, the thing that immediately comes to mind and will always be seared in my mind is Extortion 17, because I was part of that squadron when that happened, and those are the guys I was with on that deployment in 2010, and just good friends, brothers, and that was that made the Mikey situation worse.
Yeah,
and I ended up in a position where I was not there. I was deployed elsewhere while they were in Afghanistan, and what a stupid notion to be like, if I was just there, or I should have been with them, you'd be gone, dude. But that was, across the whole community, that was hard.
Yeah, I will say I remember hearing about that. It was impossible to believe for a while. So you were part of Gold Squadron when that happened?
Yeah.
How did you not end up on it?
Oh, well, I mean, troops are at different locations.
Oh, okay.
But I was in a different region of the world with the deployment and the mission I was tasked with. Yeah. And I was notified within 5 minutes of it happening by a buddy who was sitting in the JOC in Afghanistan. He said, "Go to your JOC and turn on this channel." And when I called, and he said, "Call me back." I said, "Hey, I'm staring at a burning building." He said, "It's not a burning building. That's Jonas Liu and the boys." I'm like, "What do you mean, Jonas Liu and the boys?" He said, "That's their helicopter." And of course, the natural question, well, how many, are the guys okay, or how many perished? He said, "I think all of them."
What was going through your mind when the realization of the gravity of what had happened?
I sat in that JOC for 24 hours just watching the channel and the Rangers that moved to the site. God bless them. I was told that Rangers had burns on their arms trying to reach into the fuselage, which just speaks to that service, cooperation and love for one another. But, I sort of shut down for 2 weeks. I remember I went and put all their photos up in my my room, which I don't know served any good purpose, and would just sit in my room and stare at it. And for the next 2 weeks, would only communicate when I needed to communicate with the guys, to a point where my last troop chief, great dude, Mike, called me, and it was a little bit of a Trojan horse. Somebody on the deployment had called him and said, "Hey, we got a problem." And, "Hey, how you doing, man? What's going on? How's the deployment going?" And I'm engaging with him because I had this smile that he would call me. And at the very end, he's like, "Hey, man, you're going to have plenty of time to think about this. Trust me, we all are. But right now, you need to get your head out of your ass. The boys need you." And watching they piped the funerals over TV. We watched them. And we just tried to stay busy on the rest of that deployment and keep our minds off it, like we always do, compartmentalize and just keep driving on. But it was just different when you got back, because that troop may have been 1/3 of the squadron, but they were probably 2/3 of the personalities.
Yeah.
They just were a larger than life group. And I mean, you go down the list and you're just like phenomenal. Guys like Tom Ratzlaff, who was awarded the Canadian Star, I think was the only American at the time to be awarded the second highest Canadian award for valor for something he did in Afghanistan. Guys like Derek Benson, who were just like, again, the guy who was good at everything. Lou, Jonas, I mean, the list goes on. That was just such a vast loss of life, in the amount of kids that were left without fathers, wives without husbands, mothers and fathers without their son, sisters and brothers without their brother. That hit the entire community, not only that command, but the entire community, and in a way, the nation. And just, the manner in which they went, there also is a beauty to that.
Yeah.
Because they were so tight. We called them the party troop. They fought hard. They partied harder. You're just like, yeah, they went together.
Yeah. As a leader of men in combat, what's the message that you give to your men to continue the mission and regroup after something like that?
Arguably, I don't know if I was the best at that moment. And I needed a wake-up call from a senior enlisted who I highly respected. But I think I snapped too, and we ran training as much as we could. We set up the group workouts, the cross-functional workouts. We tried to stay busy as much as possible, and I'm a believer that the highest form of leadership is lead by example, and so just show them that we're going to move through this. I'm not saying it's okay. We'll have time to reflect. I think there was also, this sounds strange, while you would have liked to be there for the families, there's part of you that also is secretly glad you weren't there to have to attend those funerals. The guys that went redeployed to attend the funerals, but even the Keikos. Like, I talked to guys because that was a mass Keiko event.
Yeah.
It was a mass casualty event. It's going to require a lot of Keikos. Talking to the guys that did that, I'm better you than me. Yeah. I don't know how you went through that.
Yeah.
And, Matt Mills, who was a good friend, and Kerry Mills, Matt was at 3.
Yeah, we did a platoon together. I knew him really, really well. And in fact, my good buddy Clint Emerson, who's been on the show a number of times, was the Keiko for Matt's family. And I was just talking to Clint the other day, actually, about all of his experiences, being at Black Squadron at the command and doing some pretty wild stuff that I wish to God he could share on the show, but he can't. But like seeing his eyes well up, talking about having to be the Keiko for Matt and his family, you can tell just absolute brutal position to be in, and I would say still haunts him to this day for sure. And Matt was one of those kind of similar guys, and that was just good at everything, and he was country boy strong. I remember trying to haze him as a new guy, and it took the platoon to do it. Just such a phenomenal dude. Chris Campbell went through Buds with him, and he was a roommate of mine right out of Buds. Same kind of thing, just phenomenal. I mean, the whole thing, just every one of those guys were just legends, you know.
Yeah. I had Carrie and a guy named Rich, who must have been beside Clint when they notified. And, keep in mind that Carrie has a 17-month-old son at home. I think it was a Saturday morning. They go and knock on the door, no response. They go back to their car. Think about Three Seals, like trying to buy as much time as possible. They're like probably talking themselves up to go back to the door as Rich described it. And the two of them, and hearing both perspectives, they went and knocked again, and she answered the door in a T-shirt that she'd slept in that night, which was Matt's T-shirt. She don't know why. She didn't usually sleep in a T-shirt. She just felt like she had to put it on that night. Rich described, and she remembers it, just the piercing screech that she let out. And as Rich tells the story, he's like, that will be forever like singed into my mind.
Yeah.
He can still hear it.
Yeah. So Clint was the Keiko for his ex-wife and two older kids. So, another thing, needing two for two separate parts of his family, essentially. And
didn't even recognize that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I knew
Yeah.
the two children from the previous marriage.
Yeah.